Ducks fans, are you ready? You are listening to the Ducks and Pucks podcast with your hosts, Mike Walters and Eddie Jones. This is the #1 home for Anaheim Ducks talk and analysis. Here we go.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. It's a special holiday edition. We've kind of been away for a little bit, with all the holiday events going on, and I was sick for a little bit, and Eddie was sick for a little bit, and now we're back, and we're both off the IR, and we're ready to go, Eddie. But before we get started, I hope everybody had a really good Christmas. We also wish you a happy New Year, and hope you all have a happy and safe holiday. Now, getting to the Ducks here, Eddie, we'll basically go through the road trip here. It's kind of a bad road trip for the Ducks, and we'll talk about the home game against Philly, and then we'll get to some injury news and kind of look at what's coming up forward in the next half here. But if we go back to the road trip that the Ducks started, which was an important one, they ended up playing 4 games on this road trip, and they didn't do that well to start out against Buffalo. Eddie, the Ducks came out in this one. They peppered the goalie with 44 shots, but they didn't get any goals and ended up losing this one 3-0.
Yeah, we've seen a couple games like this season. This one probably being the worst, but they end up getting a lot of shots on the goalie, and 44 shots is a little bit misleading. That they had some quality chances, but not enough to account for 44 shots. A lot of them were just getting tossed on net from bad angles and such. But just a poor game all around. Johnson, to his credit, he played a really good game, and the Sabres played relatively well. They got some 3 goals, which is good for them. But just again, the Ducks are struggling to score, and this game was the epitome of that.
Yeah, and we continued to see them struggle on the power play as well. They had 3 opportunities and they didn't score. They came up big on the penalty kill, which has kind of been the story of the season so far in the special teams. Eddie, the Ducks do extremely well on the penalty kill, and then the power play. Other than for points of time in November, but it's just kind of gone downhill as far as their power play unit's been doing.
Yeah, we've seen a little bit of a couple game streak here and there where they've done really well on the power play, and then it dies out for 3 or 4 games. And recently in the last game against Philadelphia, it did well. So we'll have to see if it continues from there. A little bit of a new look to their power play now with 4 forwards on the ice. So we'll have to see if they continue doing that. But yeah, it's been streaky all season and pretty much poor right now. It's sitting 22nd in the league, which is not what we'd expect it to be. You'd want it to be in the top half, but we'll have to see where they go from here.
Yeah, and after coming out of that game, the Ducks actually responded well. They went in to face New Jersey, and we had talked about Kyle Palmieri, leading the way for the Devils. Having more goals basically than the entire the Ducks leading scorer, Corey Perry there. So the Ducks were actually able to shut him out, and the Ducks would win this one. They would get a couple good bounces early in the game. We saw Chris Stewart get a goal. We saw Kessler shoot it, get his own rebound, put it back in. And the Ducks held on in this game. A late goal by New Jersey made it 2-1. But Anderson got the start. He did very, very well in this game, Eddie.
Yeah, the Devils played a really good defensive game. The Ducks were held to 18 shots. They managed to score a couple, greasy goals in the first period, and Anderson held them in from there. And these are the types of games that they have to win. And again, the penalty kill came up good. The New Jersey had 2 chances, and they had the 11th ranked power play in the league, and they've been pretty hot this year. Obviously, guys like Mike Camilleri and Lee Stepniak and Palmieri have been really great for them this season, on the power play and off on 5-on-5. And it was a good win against a unexpectedly good team this year, and I guess they're a little bit lucky that they didn't have to face Corey Schneider, but a good game for them.
Yeah, and it was nice to see Freddie get back in there. He hadn't been in there for a while, having dealt with the flu, and he played a good game, Eddie. Stopping 21 to 22 shots, so he played well in this one. He almost got the shutout if Camilleri wouldn't have gotten that late goal, but it was actually a pretty. I would have said this game was pretty vanilla, actually, because there was only 2 penalties that resulted in power plays in this game. The Ducks didn't even get a power play in this one, Eddie. It was, like you said, a defensive battle with the Ducks coming out by 1.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a reversal from what we've seen from New Jersey this season. They were more directed towards offense with their new coach, and back to maybe their style with the trap days where they would play a lot of, really heavy defense. It was kind of reminiscent in this game, but yeah, the refs played it a tight game, not a lot of penalties, and yeah, like you said, a little bit vanilla, but at least they came out with the win.
And then going forward, we had hoped that they would build some steam. They went to play the Islanders in their new arena for the first time this season in Brooklyn. And this game it actually started out well. Carl Hagelin got on the board in the first 7 minutes of the game, and Anderson was in net again. But it went downhill after that. Eddie, Clutterbuck getting a goal to tie it up. But the killer in this one was really the final minute of the period where the Islanders scored 2 goals in 43 seconds and basically knocked Anderson out of the game as Gibson came in to start the second period. And the Ducks, they got down 3-1. They fought back in the third, but they just couldn't recover in this game.
Yeah, and it's all because of the first period, especially the last minute there, that they fell apart. I mean, if you only allow one and you don't allow two in that first minute, Josh Manson's goal ends up tying it up, and you go into the second period only down one, but just a poor last minute by the Ducks D and even by Freddie as well, and he ends up getting pulled, which is unfortunate for him being in his second game back, and John Gibson comes in and actually plays really well for the rest of the game. He only allows one goal and on 19 shots, so he had a great game coming in, but by that point it was too late, and being down 2 for the rest of the game was really where they fell apart.
Yeah, it was kind of surprising, after Anderson had done so well against the Devils there. He came in and he gave up 3 goals on just 11 shots in the first period. And granted, they all weren't his fault. I mean, there was at least 1 or 2 he should have stopped, but I mean, the defense didn't help out either in the beginning of the period. But a little frustrating there, I would think, because I had expected Anderson to do better, and I mean, obviously the team as well. And it was good to see them not have a terrible second period, and to come out and try and fight it out in the beginning of the third. But overall, a little bit of a frustrating loss. You have a good game against the Devils, and then you lose this one 5-2.
Hey, the penalty kill was good again. They were 3 for 3 in this game, so. I mean, what's been a bright spot all season was good in this game, but yeah, no, it's disappointing not to come out with a loss. I mean, 5-2 is a little bit misleading. They did score an empty net goal, and John Gibson, like I said, did play really well coming in, and just a poor first period, which is actually, we would more expect that in the second period. I mean, it was only a minute away from the second period, but yeah, it's a disappointing loss that we easily could have prevented if they had closed out that period.
Yeah, and then we, finished up that road trip. You go to New York or actually stay in New York, and this time you play the Rangers. And again, the Ducks score first, this time Corey Perry. But this was a game that, and we've talked about this before, it came down to turnovers. There were some turnovers that the Ducks had made a couple times that led to a couple of the Ranger goals. And, if it wasn't for Raquel getting a late goal in the third, the Ducks, would have lost this one in regulation, but they end up going into overtime, and we kind of know what happens in overtime, Eddie. The Ducks lose this one in overtime, 3-2, a bad line change, which we've seen that too in the 3-on-3, and the Ducks would, at least they got a point, which was the good thing, but it was just frustrating because you felt that they could have gotten maybe 2 points out of this, Eddie.
Yeah, they definitely could have won this game. The first goal. Derek Brassard was a bad turnover from Manson in their own end, and easily could have been prevented. And the second goal was a bad turnover from Yuri Sekach as well. And Derek Brassard again is a beneficiary, and it puts the Rangers up 2-1. And Raquel tries to get them back into it, but like we've seen pretty much all this season, is something always goes wrong in overtime. I mean, everybody knows the drop pass to no one by Getzlaf, and the bad line change in this game leads. They're already on the power play, leads to a goal by Matt Zuccarello. So they can't seem to figure out the 3-on-3 overtime, and they could have won this game before then, which is the disappointing part.
Yeah, and that overtime, the bad shift too. I mean, Fowler had to take that penalty. There's just nothing else he could have done against McDonough because, otherwise he would have broken all alone, had a good chance. So I don't fault him for that. But then, you go into that overtime, and we've talked about this before. The way that the rules go in overtime is you don't go to 3-on-2 if there's a power play. It never gets below 3 skaters on each team. So instead it goes to a 4-on-3 power play. But with so much more ice room, in that kind of situation as opposed to a 5-on-4. It's a bad situation to be in. The Ducks penalty kill has been very well this season, but obviously in 5-on-4 situations. So the 4-on-3 here, they couldn't keep it in. To give them a chance, and they ended up losing this one in overtime. Like we said, they ended up getting a point, but it was a frustrating road trip. Eddie, the Ducks came out of the road trip 1-2-1, but we felt like they could have at least been 2-2.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, coming at the front of that was definitely the Rangers game was a game that they should have won, and going back to the game before that as well against the Islanders. I mean, you get out of that first period only down by one, you might have a chance to get back into it, and you can't really hang on the what ifs, and you got to move forward, and they moved straight into the Philadelphia game and actually had a really great game.
Yeah, we talked about that too a little bit. They went on the Christmas break, and everybody kind of wondered, okay, what's going to happen? They had those 3-4 days off. I went to the game, obviously, against Philly, which, odd bit of scheduling. The Ducks are at home for this one game. Then they go on the road again, and a Canadian trip coming up here, which we'll talk about. But this game against Philly was was kind of a wild game, right off the bat. Not even 2 minutes into it, you have Stoner getting in a fight with Manning after he lays a big check. You have all these penalties. You have a pile up by the net. You see Mason throwing punches at Perry. And then that's when that funny photo of the 5 Flyer players is in the bench, and we put a little campfire by it to signify what they were doing in there. But it was a wild first period. The good news was Ryan Getzlaf scored, and it wasn't an empty net goal. He scored on the power play. The Ducks had that 5-on-3 after that big melee, and a couple other things that had happened that period. And Philly, came back and tied it up. But it was a crazy period. It was a pretty good period in the beginning for the Ducks. We saw them go down in the second period, early 2-1, but again they came back on the power play. And Perry kind of went off in this game. He had a power play goal in the second. He had another goal to give him the basically game winner in the third period, and the Ducks ended up pulling this one out, Eddie, 4-2.
Yeah, Perry had a great night in this game. He had 2 goals, 6 shots, 4 hits, a couple of penalty minutes in there too. So he had an all-around game. And this one he only played about 16 minutes too, which is a little bit surprising with being on the power play for all 3 times that they had. But yeah, good for Getzlaf to finally get the monkey off his back. I mean, the first goal he scored this year was an empty netter, and it's been something ridiculous, like 40 games since he scored on an NHL goaltender. So great for him. It was on the 5-on-3, but the power play did look better in this game, and Perry ends up squeaking one by Mason to get they were 2 for 3 on the power play for this night. So with them, like I mentioned earlier, trying 4 forwards on the power play, hopefully that is something they can continue to do and get success from. But I think this is one of the best games they've played in a while. Obviously, coming off the poor road trip that we talked about, and the 2 Flyers goals that were scored, there was nothing Gibson and the Ducks really could do. The first one took a crazy bounce off the new boards and landed right to Voracek, who had a wide open net, and Gibson did really well to get back and attempt to save it, but there was almost nothing you could do. And the power play goal for Raffle was a slap shot that hit Matt Reed in front of the net, and Gibson was expecting to hit him, had no idea where it was, and landed right to Raffle, who had an open net again to shoot at and scored. So this game could have been a shutout, could have been more too. I mean, Mason stood on his head in the first period, and I think just an all-around good effort from the Ducks. I mean, scoring on the power play, scoring shorthanded with a great diving effort from Clayton Stoner, and getting one on even strength as well. Just a really good effort from everybody in this game.
Yeah, I mean, the Ducks did well in this game. They eliminated the turnovers in this game, which had been the problem we talked about, in the last couple games on the road trip in New York and whatnot. The face-offs, they really dominated. They won 37 face-offs compared to 19 for Philly, which is always a good sign when you see the Ducks doing that. The Ducks won the hit battle, too, 27-18. So, I mean, they all around did what they needed to do, especially the special teams, as you mentioned, and it looked like, that time off it was good for the Ducks. And this is kind of the big issue that people were talking about is, what would happen when the Ducks come out of this break, Eddie. We had a little article that we put up there kind of as a mid-season review. Also, Eric Stevens did a very, very good one as well with all the quotes from Murray and whatnot, talking about what was going on in terms of on the managerial level. Our article we talked a little bit more about at the player level, but if you had to go back and look at another team, and I know everybody doesn't like to look at it, but if you go back to the 2011-2012 season, there was a team that was in the same position, Eddie, on Christmas as the Ducks. They only had a couple more points. They're up the 5 freeway. Yeah, that's the Kings who I'm talking about. But they were in the same position, and they ended up in a weak Pacific Division that year, made the 8th seed, and went all the way. So there's a chance the Ducks can do it. I mean, I'm not saying that they should go in and make it barely as the 8th seed and try and turn on the playoffs. That's not what I'm saying at all. But with the way this division's going, Eddie, the Ducks can end up anywhere from second all the way to last. It's wide open.
Yeah, they just have to get in. The only bad thing is finishing in that final spot. You might have to face the Kings. I think the only advantage is because the Pacific Division is so poor, and that the two wildcard teams are most likely going to be from the Central Division. You can still avoid the Kings and just squeak into the playoffs. I think again taking advantage of the Pacific Division being so poor and only 3 teams making it, you'll end up facing either Vancouver or San Jose or in Edmonton or Calgary or in Arizona. If they manage to make the playoffs in that second or third spot, you'll end up facing them instead of the Kings, which is actually a very good thing for the Ducks to avoid one of the best teams in the Western Conference.
Yeah, I mean, because the Kings just dismantled Vancouver 5-0. So right now, you have Arizona and Vancouver fighting it out at second place. And San Jose right behind there. So, if the Ducks are able to squeeze in there, they may be playing one of those 3 teams instead of the Kings in the first round. Let the wild card from the Central come over. So, I think that they can still do it. The biggest concern is obviously the offense, and we talked about that. You're not averaging 2 goals a game, and that's going to be an issue. But you look at the positives. We talked about the penalty kill has been very good. Gibson's been good in most of the games. Freddie has too. They both had moments here or there where they didn't play as well, but overall they both played really well. And the defense, for the most part, has been pretty good as well. Obviously there've been a few games too that they've had some lapses, but for the most part it's been decent. It hasn't been terrible. The big issue though coming up now is out of this game that they played against Philly, Cam Fowler sprained his knee, as we found out, and he's most likely not going to be available for this next road trip. The Ducks recalled Shea Theodore, which, we all get excited about this, Eddie, but we don't know if he's going to play. He's been up a couple times and hasn't played.
Yeah, recall number 3. Every time he's come up, everybody's been really excited to see him play. Maybe more likely now with a minute eater like Fowler being put out. And an offensive defenseman. I mean, this is the first time we've seen a more offensive-minded guy get out of the lineup. I mean, pretty much Lindholm and Vaughn have been in the lineup all season, as well as Fowler. So this might be the chance for Theodore to finally get in. You'd probably prefer Theodore over Holzer in this situation, where as Holzer was preferred in the last 2 times Theodore was called up. And you'll just like the night in Philadelphia, that you'll expect Lindholm and Vatanen to eat most of the minutes coming up in these next few games. Bieksa will be among the leaders too, and I think we all hope Theodore gets in. He's having a decent season down in San Diego. He's got 16 points in 27 games. A lot of people would be expecting Montour to be the guy get called up, but it looks like they really want him to just play all the games he can in the AHL this season and just stick it out down there. And I think they're really focusing on his development. Everybody knows Theodore is a top prospect, and I think they want to give him his chance in the NHL. So hopefully, with these next few games coming up, he'll get a chance to play.
Yeah, exactly. And I went down to San Diego actually for the teddy bear toss game, which was fun. I hadn't gone down for a goals game really ever, because I hadn't been there for a little while, and obviously now that they're connected to the Ducks, it's fun to go check it out. But they played well in that game. Theodore looked really good as well. So I'm hoping that he does play on this trip. and I don't know, what's the deal as far as Dupre coming back. A lot of people have asked questions about that. We know that the one update we do have is that he did practice recently, so he's been out there, but we've seen him practice and then not practice. So these concussion things are tricky. We talked about this earlier today amongst other people in our staff, and Eddie, we were talking about other players, but we talk about Paul Correa and the stuff that he had happened to him, Tony Ludman, and the hit that he took by our favorite player in Detroit, Abdelkader. So there's players like that have had some issues. So for now, I think we're going to have to consider Dupre out for who knows how long. Hopefully not forever, like those guys ended up having to do. I mean, obviously Correa played for a while after some of the hits that he took, but I think it's really going to come down to Holzer or Theodore going on this road trip. And I mean, I like Holzer. I think he plays a solid game. He's not going to score, but he doesn't make a lot of mistakes. So I think he's going to do very well. But I think you got to throw Theodore in there at some point, Eddie. I mean, I don't know if the chances are good because, like we said, we've been kind of teased a little bit the first two times he's been up.
Yeah, but there's only so many times I think that they can call him up and not play him. I mean, there's other guys you can call up if you're not eventually going to play him and just to fill a role. I mean, Shane O'Brien's a guy you can call up and just be a seventh defenseman if you really want to play Holzer. But I think with Fowler being out, I think that's a significant reason why we were a little bit more excited about seeing Theodore play, just because, like I said, he's an offensive-minded defenseman, and we'll need a guy to fill in on the power play, be able to skate, make plays, and not just play a sound defensive game. And that is something Theodore has been working on. I think that's why a lot of people are excited, for him to come up. I mean, we know how well he's played offensively in the WHL with the Seattle Thunderbirds coming up, and some of the the amount of points he's been able to put up in the seasons there have been amazing, and he's doing well in the AHL now. And you look at the team we just played last night in Philadelphia, losing one of their top offensive defensemen in Mark Streit, and they called their rookie from the AHL and Shane Gostisbehere, and what he's done in the last 16 games, he's got 14 points. He's quarterbacked their power play, and I think we all hope that Theodore could come up and do just as well until Fowler gets back. Because I mean, right now he's at least out for the next 3 games. We would expect he's not traveling with them on the road trip, so this is his chance. And if he gets his shot, hopefully, I mean, he can emulate what Gostisbehere has done in Philadelphia.
Yeah, and this road trip that we're going to talk about right now, I mean, it's huge. The Ducks are going to be playing, teams in the division that they need to beat. They have Calgary coming up, who has been on fire. They've won 11 in a row at home, Eddie. And I mean, we own Calgary at Honda Center, but going on the road facing this team, it's a hot team right now. I mean, not to say that because they're the Flames, but I mean, they're a hot team.
Yeah, and they're benefiting from a lot of goal scoring right now, specifically coming from Johnny Gaudreau, who was just named first star of the week, and I mean he's just been unbelievable in the last few games that they've played, and they're still last in the West in goals against, and they obviously have their struggles on the road, but like you said, they've won 11 in a row at home. They're 12-5 at home. It's going to be a tough game. I mean, we've owned them at Honda Center. Everybody knows the story, but Goodrow in the last week, he's got 5 goals in the last week. I mean, he's on fire, and that whole top line too with Monahan and Giordano is playing well for them, Brody, and they're getting some good goaltending from Ramo as well. So it's going to be a tough game, and this 3 games coming up all against Pacific Division teams. The 3 teams in front of us, obviously with Vancouver losing tonight and San Jose losing right now to Colorado. These are probably the biggest 3 games of the season right now.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's big because we're only a few points behind Calgary right now. We're 4 points behind, and then we're a point behind Edmonton right now. So every win here is a big 4-point swing, Eddie.
Yeah, and you've got 3 games in hand on Edmonton. Realistically, you should catch them. I mean, you would hope they would win one of these next 3 games. Calgary, you have a game in hand on them, so you win against Calgary, you get that 4-point swing, and then you're only 1 win away from being tied with them in points. San Jose losing tonight is big. You win. I mean, right now the Ducks, after San Jose plays this game, will have a game in hand and only be 4 points back. A big win if they can win these next games. And Vancouver as well. You got 3 games in hand on Vancouver, only 5 points back. I mean, we've said this every time they've gone and played a couple Pacific Division teams in a row, but right now with the way the standings are, these are the biggest 3 games of the season so far, and can, I mean, I know it's early, but they could really make or break if the Ducks, can finish in a playoff spot.
Yeah, and I mean, this is 3 games. I honestly think that the Ducks can win all 3 games. I mean, granted, the toughest test is going to be Calgary for sure, and then going into Edmonton and Vancouver, they should be able to win 2. But I mean, they can win 3. I really think they can. The interesting story that just came out too is with Edmonton, Eddie. They made that trade, sending Scrivens to Montreal, and Montreal finally unloaded Cassian over to Edmonton. And this is interesting because of all the trade rumors that we had heard with Khudobin and Anderson. So, that kind of puts some of that to rest in terms of the sense that, Khudobin went down to San Diego. Obviously, doesn't mean that nothing will happen, but he went down there, and this move was made with Montreal. So it's kind of interesting now. It seems like maybe the Ducks won't be moving anybody, at least short term, Eddie.
Yeah, and Montreal was really one of the only teams looking for a goaltender right now. The market's pretty dry, and it wasn't a trade that would happen under any other circumstances. Pretty much, it was a forced trade. Montreal had no plans of keeping Cassian. They sent him down to the AHL. They thought they could get something for him, or at least they just kind of wanted him out of the organization. And Edmonton was willing to take a shot on the guy. They need some size, they need some grit. He could still be a top 6 player. He has the potential. And Montreal needed some goaltending help. I mean, Tokarski has been all right. Condon's been pretty good, but they need some help until Price gets back. And this is a trade that made sense. And is this going to open the floodgates for them for more trades in the league? I don't really know about that. The roster freeze is obviously over, so there's a potential for a lot of trades to be happening right now. But as for the Ducks stealing their goalies, I think it'd be unwise right now to deal with the market being so dry, and there's no really any need for goalies right now.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that the way the situation has come up now is, and we've seen some other professionals out there talk about it too, is that it looks like Gibson is number 1 now technically for the Ducks. I mean, he's been the guy. I mean, it's unfortunate that Freddie went out with that nasty flu where he couldn't even eat for a week and lost all that weight. But, I would expect Gibson to start this game against Calgary. And, I really think he's going to keep going at it for a little while here. I'm not opposed to them rotating because we've seen this in Dallas right now where they're rotating goalies and it's going to keep them fresh down the hall. So I kind of hope the Ducks do that. I mean, they're kind of leaning on Gibson right now, which is fine, but I wouldn't mind them kind of maybe going back and forth a little bit. I mean, because you don't want Anderson to just sit on the bench and not get some game time either.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely see him play throughout this road trip. I guess it will depend on the game against Calgary tomorrow when he plays. I would think that Gibson, like you said, would get the start tomorrow, and then if the Ducks win and Gibson plays well, we could very well see him start on Thursday, and then Freddie get to get the second game of the back-to-back against Vancouver on Friday, or you could see Freddie get the start on Thursday and Gibson on Friday. I think it all depends really how the game goes tomorrow. If Gibson has a poor game against Calgary, I would think you would see Freddie on Thursday, give Gibson a little bit more days going off, see how Freddie does. But it's a back-to-back, so you would probably see Gibson get back in on Friday. But yeah, like I said, it all depends on how the game goes tomorrow, and who we'll see, on the Thursday game against Edmonton.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what we're gonna have to wait and see. I'm hoping that they come out with a win and carry the momentum against that red-hot Calgary team. Another interesting note too is if you look at the lineup and kind of some things that I've thrown out there too is Stewart's been the 3rd leading scorer. And it was kind of interesting that he's been scratched the last 2 games. They said he was healthy. There's nothing going wrong. So that kind of surprises me a little bit, Eddie, because if you look at the Ducks lineup, you have Raquel on the top line. The top line has been scoring, not every game, but, more than anybody else. You look at the 3rd line that they've had for, a big chunk of the season. They've had Hagelin, Horkoff, and Cogliano on there. To me, the 2nd line is the one that's been having the issues. Bolesky's gone, obviously, and, with Silverberg and Kessler on there, they really haven't had the chemistry. So, to me, I've been kind of surprised. I'd like to see Stewart on the 2nd line with Kessler for a little while and maybe try to get this, second punch of a line going. Because, last year the Ducks had the 1-2 punch, and that was huge, especially down the stretch when they figured out Silverberg, Bolesky, and Kessler. So I really think that they need to figure out the second line. And to me, I would like to see Stewart in there, whether they take Hagelin from the third and put him back on the second, like they did in this last game, or if they throw Sakic in there. I don't know. They got to figure that out. But that's just my little observation. I hope Stewart gets back in on this road trip, which I think he will. And I'd like to see him on the second line. I mean, he's been all over it. He's been on every line basically. But I would like to see him with Kessler for a little while.
Yeah, I was surprised we didn't see him against a hard-hitting physical team like the Flyers, and we saw Santorelli get the start instead. And what we've seen all season is Santorelli and Stewart have been, the odd ones out. They've been the ones who have been getting scratched here and there, and mostly Santorelli because of how well Stewart has played. But you would expect him to be in for some of these games on the road trip and probably take Santorelli's place, which would mean you would see him probably play with Horcoff and Sakic. I really liked how Sakic played last game. I really liked how he's played in almost every game this season. I mean, he hasn't put up a lot of points. I think he only has 3 points. But he just plays with a lot of energy. Horcoff has been great this year on the penalty kill and even on his line for what we pretty much got what we expected and a little bit more from him. And we just need, like you said, to spark that second line. I think everybody hoped that Hagelin, Kessler, and Silverberg were going to be a good line, and they seem to want to keep going back to that. I think they really hope that something between them is just going to click, and they're eventually going to start scoring. And I think there's no reason they can't. That line has so much speed and skill that they should be doing well. There's just, for some reason, they're not. I'm not opposed to keeping them together because I like how all the other lines are set up. And I think we might just have to wait and hope that they finally get going.
Yeah, and we're going to have to see on this road trip, and that's what some of the fans have been concerned about too. Some of the questions we've gotten, Eddie, has been about this. We had Devin ask us too about this road trip and whether or not it's a make it or break it for the team, referring to some comments that Murray had made, and what does that implicate? And I really do think this is a make it or break it road trip because some other fans have, talked to me, and I know they talked to you too, and said, hey, the Ducks are in the bottom of the league. We could just keep tanking and get a high draft pick. And I'm like, well, yeah, you could, but I'd rather play well and see how we can do because the Pacific Division is so weak. And we've talked about this a little bit before. We talk about it more now. But, if you end up in the bottom of the NHL, there's no guarantee with the lottery system, and if you try to make a move or something like that. So I'd rather see the Ducks make it and not, break it on this road trip and gain some ground. And I really believe that they can make enough ground and make the playoffs. And if they play the way that they did against Philly, and I know it's only one game, it's one game at a time, but if they can play like that, for the rest of the season, I think they're going to be in a pretty good shape, Eddie. And I think that this 3 games is really going to be where we're going to see. I think a snapshot of what's going to happen the rest of the season.
Yeah, I do in a way agree that this road trip is make it or break it. I think if you lose all 3 of these games or you only win 1 and you only pick up 2 points on this road trip, it's going to set you back even farther just because you're only 5 points out, which extremely lucky to be in the bottom of the Western Conference, only be 5 points out of the playoffs. You rarely get that lucky. The Pacific Division is so poor, apart from the LA Kings, who are pretty much locks to win this division right now. I think the focus shouldn't be on going and trying to win the Pacific Division for a 4th year in a row. They just need to make the playoffs, and it starts here. You gotta win 2 of these games. You have to win 2 of these games to be in the running. You can't come into this road trip, lose 2, and still expect to make a run for the playoffs. They've got to win 2, and winning 3 would obviously be the perfect situation, but tanking for a draft pick is out of the option for the Ducks. Their cup window is slowly shrinking with Kessler and Getzlaf and Perry just turning 30 this year. So you don't want to rely on that lottery system down there. Obviously Austin Matthews, it would be a great pickup, and even some of the guys they have down there, that Jesse Pujärvi and Patrick Laine, it's 2 big Finnish guys, and Alex Nylander, who are all prototypical Ducks players that Bob Murray would like to draft. But it's not really a season, with so much hope for a cup run and based off last season that you'd really want to go for a top 5 draft pick.
Yeah, and I mean, who would have thought that coming out of the Christmas break, Eddie, we'd even be talking about this? I mean, we're talking about, whether or not the Ducks would make the playoffs or whether or not they would try to, play poorly to get a draft pick. I mean, it's just been such a crazy season, which nobody in their right mind has, predicted in terms, at least of the Ducks. I mean, it's just been just weird. It's been a weird season, but I do think, like you said, 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3. That's what the Ducks have to do on this trip, and I really do think that they can get it done. I think if they can come out against the Flames and knock them off on that 11 game, home winning streak, that would be huge for the Ducks. I think that would be huge momentum to then go into the back-to-back games with Edmonton and Vancouver. So, to me, of the 3 games, this one against Calgary is the biggest game, Eddie, and I really hope that they carry over the play from Philly and take it to the Flames because historically the games we played against the Flames, whether or not the Ducks win them all at home or they're on the road or whatnot, they're always competitive games. They always seem to be high scoring. So I think tomorrow is going to be a real entertaining affair.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's going to be a pivotal game to how the road trip goes. You want to start off well. You want to get on the road. I mean, it is a road trip, but it's not as bad as some road trips. You get into Calgary and then you don't have to go too far after that. You only have to go right up, up the road to Edmonton and just over to Vancouver. So it's not too bad after you get down there. But yeah, to get off to a good start is going to be pivotal in this. And yeah, I mean, I don't know how many times I could to mention that it's such an important road trip based on the standings. And if they come out of this with 2 losses, you would probably expect some sort of trade or something to be done.
Yeah, because after that, they're going to be at home for a while. I mean, I'm as people know, I'm done with school, so I'm all excited because January is the month for the home games. If you're a Ducks fan, I mean, they've got a couple weeks there in a row, like 3 games. It's like Sunday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, Wednesday, Friday. There's all these home games coming up, so they're going to come up on a long homestand too after that, which is going to be beneficial. And that's some of the other questions, you mentioned that have come up too is what do the Ducks do? People have asked, given the situation, what's happened. We know Boudreaux's still there, which, a lot of people thought he might have been gone, but he isn't. So a lot of people ask, what should the Ducks do? What should the Ducks do? And I think, unfortunately, Murray's in a very difficult position, Eddie. He's made these contracts with certain players and he's got them locked down. Hagelin for 4 years. He got the extension for Bieksa. You got Silverberg in there. Obviously Kessler with what he got, which he deserved too. I mean, these weren't contracts necessarily that players didn't deserve, but the problem is a lot of these guys are locked down, and for him to try to make a move and trade, I think it's going to be difficult. We already know he tried to do some stuff with Anderson and Hudobin and wasn't able to do it. So I don't really know if a trade can be made right now. I mean, it might not be closer to the trade deadline, and that may be too late. So, the other issue is people say, okay, well, what about the coach? Yeah, I mean, that could be a possibility too. But you and I have talked about this, and I just wrote it in one of those recent articles, is who do you replace him with? I mean, there's not a lot of quality, coaches out there. I mean, yeah, you could bump up Yanni or McLean, but I don't really know if that's going to change, anything too much. So, winning solves everything, obviously. So I'm just hoping that the Ducks start winning and we can not talk about any of that kind of stuff, Eddie, because I just don't. I think Murray's kind of in a corner as far as trying to make a move.
Yeah, and a lot of the trades depend on certain things to happen. I mean, it looks like Boudreaux's going to stay. I mean, with recent comments from Murray backing him and calling out a lot of returning players. He said the blame shouldn't fall on the new players, it should fall on the returning players, and hopefully that gets some of those guys going. But yeah, a lot of trades depend on how certain guys play. I mean, if Theodore gets a chance and he plays extremely well, maybe we could see a move where Vatanen or Lindholm or Fowler end up getting traded. I mean, it's not ideal, and it's not something we'd want to see happen with how well all 3 of them have played this season. But you've got a lot of defensive depth. You've got Marcus Pettersson, who's having a good couple games so far at the World Juniors. You got Larson, who's also playing pretty well at the World Juniors so far. You've got Theodore and Montour. I mean, you're pretty good in the defensive side of your prospect pool. So dealing a defenseman, if Theodore can come up and play really well, He's not out of the picture, but again, it depends on how well he plays and if he even gets a shot to play. And then you got to look at is it the right time to make a trade? Like you said, could you make one closer to the deadline? Is it going to be too late? Do you deal the first round pick? And if you deal the first round pick, do you lottery protect it and make it worth less? Or do you risk not lottery protecting it and missing the playoffs and, end up winning the lottery and getting Austin Matthews and another team gets it? There's so many ifs and ands and buts and if they're going to make a trade. And yeah, he's got a tough job right now. There's with the Ducks not having a second round pick, there's no leeway to really trade that first round pick, and there's a lot of guys that you can't really trade on this team right now.
Exactly. Then that's the problem. I mean, they're locked in with a lot of these contracts on a lot of their players. So to me, the best thing to do is to try to get the secondary scoring that we've missed, get that second line going, which, we talked about a little bit earlier in the show. So, I mean, that's the key to me. I mean, if you can go with Gibson and Anderson playing well, you got the penalty kill playing well. If the defense can be a little bit more consistent, all those things are really good. I mean, those are the things that you need more of, to win in the playoffs. I mean, obviously you need the offense too, but if you can shut down the other team and only, allow 1 or 2 goals a game, then you're in a good position to win. I mean, granted, they're only scoring about 2 goals a game. So if they can up that a little bit, get some more offense going, I think that they'll be all right. And that's what they're going to have to do, and try to avoid the what ifs, like you said, trading a high draft pick or trying to make a move where maybe you have to trade for less value than what you really wanted, which, Murray, he's not the type of GM that's going to do that. And that's why we still have Anderson and Hudobin. He's not going to try and trade them away for something silly like a Cassian or whatever like Montreal had to do, unloading him. We're not going to do stuff like that. But it's a tight spot, and I don't think anything's going to happen in the next week or two. I hope that the Ducks just perform better on this road trip, come back for the long homestand, and we start making a charge. And, we're going to be playing the Kings coming up here soon, too, and playing more Pacific teams this week. And I think that's a good thing. These are the teams that, that are your rivals. These are the teams the games that you should get up more for than a New York or a Philadelphia. So, excuse me, a team that you only see twice a year, once away and once at home. So that's what I'm looking for, too, is extra motivation against division rivals to carry this team in January, Eddie.
Yeah, and just a side note too, if anybody has some free time to catch some of these games before the tournament's over, the World Juniors are going on right now, and the Ducks have 3 prospects at the tournament. Marcus Pettersson and Jakob Larsson are on Sweden's team, and like I said earlier, they're doing pretty well right now. And Julius Nautanen is playing for Finland, so if you have any time to watch those games, I know also the U.S. team and Team Canada are playing as well. But just to get a chance to check out some of the top Ducks prospects at the tournament. It's a fun tournament to watch, and it's really cool to see some of the top young players play.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always good to see, more hockey is better. So it's always good to watch and see some of these guys because hopefully they'll be on the Ducks in the future as well. So stay tuned on those. And, we'll try and put out some more updates on some of those. I haven't really put out as many updates on the scores and stuff, but I'll try to get some more out there, or at least maybe some articles recapping, some of the scores during the week. I guess only a little couple updates that we have left, Eddie, is, we'll have some more watch parties coming up here in January. I don't know the exact schedule, but I'll figure out with the good folks over at El Ranchito, and we'll figure out, now that the holidays settle down, everybody having their parties and all the craziness that happens, with family and friends and get-togethers, the schedule will be a little bit easier to maintain, coming January, February. So we'll get some of those dates out there to you. Also, a little side note on the shirts. I've been working with the NHLPA to get a license for approval of using all kinds of different shirts with player nicknames and whatnot. I'm in the process of getting that done right now, so that's pending. So far, so good. I've talked to the NHL, and there's no problem with the shirts or anything like that. So I'm just trying to get approval from the Players Association so we can, do more and have some more designs for you guys. And that's really it. We're going to try and, do our weekly show more and more now. The holidays were a little bit crazy. Eddie and I are both sick, and we both had finals and all kinds of other family get-togethers and things going on. So we'll try to get you caught up every week. Plus the Ducks didn't really play a whole lot here in the last 3 weeks, Eddie, but good to be back to talk about hockey, and we'll try and be back in a week and get it going.